Hello?
Hello, is this good news?
Hey!
You're being recorded, so listen, I just hung up from the other show and just made a new one real quick because you gotta tell us about Hood News. What is Hood News and why are you and David Bryson the only reporters, black reporters that people know in West Virginia? Why is that?
Hood news isn't really the real news, but it's more or less the only real news that black people are going to see.
In Charleston, though, right?
In Charleston. Because when something happens, people will call me or they'll message me. And they'll be like, did you just see a whole bunch of police cars flying down the street? Or did you hear about such and such getting shot 5 seconds ago? Literally 5 seconds ago. And so I go there and I give them the real life, unedited versions of what's going on. There is no clean copies. There's no edited takes. It's real life hood news. Like, you get right off the scene interviews. It may be a crackhead. It may be a heroin addict. It may be a police officer who's pissed off. But you're getting real life emotions. And so I decided to call it hood news.
So why do you do this?
I do it because our community needs to see what's going on from our community's perspective. You see it one way on News Channel 8, and you see it a different in real life every day on these streets.
Well, I agree. And, you know, one of the things that, you know, I'm working to build through Black by God, and this is just a little, you know, way for me to find out what might work in the community. As I worked with Lucia Lee and Markel Marketing to survey over 100 black folks from West Virginia, asking them what they wanted, you know, from the news. And that's why, you know, one of the things is we don't have any, I mean, we do in television, we'll get black reporters, but as far as print goes or any long-form journalism, we don't have people telling their stories. And I'm hoping that I can, you know, be a part of that transition. But
why would they want to tell? Sometimes it's hard for them to tell our stories because our stories are raw, they're real, and like I said, they're unedited. Sometimes the story isn't going to be the best story.
Right.
It's not going to be something that you really want to see, but it's the truth. The truth is a hard pill to swallow. I mean, you can run away from it all you want, but at some point you're still going to have to deal with it. They've been running away from racism that they keep saying isn't real, but obviously we're still protesting. Obviously we're still fighting for rights. So it's still, racism is still real. You know what I'm saying?
So let me ask good news, because one of the things on the call that I just kind of, I don't know what I'm doing just back here. But anyway, one of the things that people said out of the survey was that they needed the news to like you said, tell the whole story. And one of the stories that they felt that they didn't get the whole story on was the Frida Gilmore story. That, you know, there was just basically, there was a settlement and that was it. So is that an example of something where the Hood News could find out what really happened?
That's the story where the Hood News explained what happened and told what happened, but people didn't want to see what happened. I screamed to the top of my lungs, the settlement is nothing without ownership for the cities and those officers' actions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's nothing without the city showing that they actually do care about what happened to the young lady. Without the city if the mayor and the chief of police can both say that if they were the officer, they wouldn't have done it, then why wouldn't you implement a policy that would never allow the city to be sued again? Think of it in a financial standpoint. Why are we allowing officers to go out here and continuously cost our city money? So why wouldn't you fight for a citizens review board? It's one thing to say that you're fighting for something, but make things happen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like at a certain point we get comfortable and complacent with the things that are going on. And that's what happened with the Frida Gilmore situation. People got tired and complacent of the things that were just going on. And it's just like, well, obviously the city's not going to change. The city's not going to change if you don't demand it.
Right. Or if they don't have one of the oldest, they call journalism the fourth estate, and its mission is to hold people accountable. If because it's a resource. It's a way for people to be held accountable. And there's a fancy word for what you're doing, Martise. It's called solutions journalism, right? And so it's like when you present the problem, but what you just did was also present the solution, right? Like the solution is not just in a settlement, right? Which obviously people don't feel comfortable with, right? They're like, okay, what else? But providing these other options. So how do you anchor yourself in, like, if the Hood News had more resources, what would it do? I know it's just you, but if you were passing the mic to somebody else, what would you tell them how you cover a story?
Get out there, and I would tell them to speak, regardless of what you think somebody else is going to tell you. Speak what you feel and speak what you see. And at the end of the day, let the truth be seen. Always let the truth be seen. It may not be pretty, it may not be beautiful, but the truth is always going to set everyone free, and it's always you don't have to explain anything if you show them the truth. Mm-hmm. I've never met somebody go to court, let's say, yeah, I won, and then they had to like fully go back and explain why they won after they got they you know what I'm saying?
Right.
If I win, I win. You saw I won because I got this money. When you have the truth and you're going out here and you're getting the raw and edited story, get everybody's opinion, get all sides of it, even some of the sides that you might not think are correct. Listen, when I go out here and I run to a crime scene, I talk to the people on the porches, the next door neighbors. I talk to the kids. I talk to the officers. I talk to everyone, and then I piece it together, and that's how we build our stories.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know John. My co-host John Kemet Shabazz L. Are you on the line, John?
I made it back in.
I'm so sorry. Listen, we're all just learning over here, John. Meet Martise. Martise meet John. He does the Shabazz report. He covers the state, but he's based out of Morgantown. John, you want to tell Martise about the grassroots reporting you do?
Yes, brother. I just found as I was indicating earlier, I found myself doing it because I recognized I had an Afrocentric background. I studied the scholars from 1984, say up to 1994. So having that background, I had a certain type of perspective, and I seen that in the major media, I felt like we were omitted, or we was kind of down. When I say we, specific black issues, I seen that we didn't get a lot of good play in the major media. So I was concerned about my image.
Because it's not making them no money. If it's not basketball or football, what they gonna put you on there for? You saw when we went to get a black president.
Right, and that's a good point. A follow-up point for that would be that I worked in Pittsburgh for NOI Security Agency back in 1995, and we saved. I remember we saved a home from catching on fire. We was there. Those of us that were security guards, we actually were using buckets of water to fight that fire. And if we don't be there doing that until the fire department arrives, this home burns down. When the media arrived, they interviewed the fire department, and we were standing there all burnt up and wet, and they looked over us and ignored us. Nobody asked us a question. And we were the ones really that saved that woman from getting burned up. Okay.
But here's my thing. Nobody that was standing out there took interest in what you just did, not even the homeowners.
Yeah, it happens like that. Yeah. So now us as grassroots reporters, we're in a position to take a story like that and highlight it, and highlight it. That which is rejected, by the mainstream media, if we're tight and as we grow, we should be in a position to highlight those people that are rejected by the mainstream media. For instance, Sister Amy Parks. We pay tribute to her. But to some extent, Sister Amy Parks was attacked and maligned by the mainstream. She was persecuted to some extent. Okay? And however she's won an hour, and we hold her high.
And I think there's a disconnect. One of the things that I hope Black by God can fill, and that is connecting people, right? Because, as Marquise, we were talking about the Frida Gilmore story, right? So the Frida Gilmore story is familiar to people in Charleston, right? But as further up north we go, they're going to remember Sister Amy Parks and the brother that you interviewed, John. What's his name?
The brother got beat up by the
got
beat up by the police over in Westover. You talking about that case?
Yeah. So it's sort of like we have these stories, but I think this is Crystal thinks that our greatest means is in creating these information connections, right? So that your story, Hood News story, can be amplified across West Virginia through other Black grassroots reporters and vice versa. Because, our strength is
with each other.
That information out, because one of the things too that I'm finding is when I talk about Black people in West Virginia to, folks in, what do you want to call them, city folks or other folks, they don't think we exist, right? And so not only do we have to have a record for ourselves, right? But we have to have a record in this national narrative that I don't think they don't even, other Black folks don't even know we exist. When I talk about, and I love Leisha Lee, and I can see is one of our, she's a hip hop journalist. She should, not should. I don't like to say people should do anything but I see her as a hip hop journalist. I see her as a person that holds, a history that's very important, and that, that should have a national voice in that narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that one of my goals is how can Black by God be a portal, not only to connect grassroots reporters, but also to reach out and do the work to connect with other media sources like you do, Brother John, with the Blog Talk radio shows, like when you go on there, when you go on there, you talk about Black people in West Virginia, what do they say? What do they think?
Well, that's interesting that you would ask that question because, Black Unity Coalition started out, it started out as a result of the hate crimes march down in Charleston. And this is something that really doesn't go off unless the national demands it. I'm just going to be the one to tell you because I was the one to hold the door open for that, right? One of the early organizers because I took time to go to Jamestown for a demonstration there. When you go to demonstrations, when you participate in national demonstrations and events, you make connections with people. And if something go down in your region and they want to respond nationally, you get contacted, and that's what happened. Because I went to Jamestown 2 or 3 months before and met certain people face to face, and they had confidence in me when the Megan Williams hate crimes jumped off. Nobody wants to do anything about it, but some people from the national call and they're outraged. So
you said Megan Williams?
Yes.
I went to school with her.
Okay. Now listen. Now when that initially happened, let's be clear. As a researcher investigator, I called down there and asked some contacts that I know about that case. They told me, hey man, that case is not one of the best cases, man. Leave that alone, man. You stay on up there in Morgantown, leave it alone. However, I got the call from the national. Look, man, see if you can get us an interview with that woman, man. People on the national are outraged about that. People in Charleston wasn't necessarily outraged about it until the national flamed up and drew attention to it because it was not only that was a hate crime. The national looked at it in the context of other hate crimes that occur from city to city, from state to state throughout the country. Okay, people in Charleston just might have looked at it from the limited construct of who she was and what she was doing. You know what I mean? It happens
Very
like
true.
that. The difference in perspective. Difference in perspective. But anyway, it's that case right there, and that case got highlighted as a result of black people looking at a set of facts from their own perspective. Bottom line. That's what I mean. And that's one of the things we try to do with grassroots reporting, to get us to examine things from our own perspectives and from our own best interests, if we can train ourselves to do that after having been in Eurocentric education. Many of us with degrees and certified to look at things that are not in our, from a perspective that is not in our own best interest. And in Afrocentricity, there was a whole line of scholars. Neely Fuller, in his book, he details Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. There was a whole line of scholars that gave us information to fight back and reclaim our mind. You know, so I just wanted to put that out there because that's one of the bases of Afrocentric grassroots reporting, to be able to have an African-centered perspective. And sometimes it takes about 10 years to be able to get a bunch of the stuff that was put in our head to make us think, to make us look at ourselves from an inferior perspective.
Listen, sometimes we be the problem. And that's why I like also saying I'm hood news, because like I say, lead with the truth. I will be the first person to show up on a crime scene, and the first words out of my mouth will be, "So y'all not tired of funerals yet?" And people think I'm disrespectful and that I don't have any sense for the scene that I'm on. But my thing's just like this. Are y'all not tired of this? This is your area. This is your area.
You're talking about
like just gun violence.
Black on black
When
violence.
you just a black on black crime, like we at some point you have to take ownership and responsibility for the things that you perpetrate.
Mm-hmm.
Like we have to take ownership for our actions, and that's why I do enjoy doing hood news, because I can keep it 100 with people. I can say to people, when I roll up to like a couple of weeks ago, I rolled up to a crime scene. A young man was selling drugs. Well, the young man had his son in the car. Now, right off the bat, I didn't see that he had his son in his car. But when I got there, the Family Dollar lady instantly starts giving me the rundown on the scene. She's like, the police officers did their job. They pulled the son out to the side. Like the police didn't know that his son was in there. And I'm like, wow. And my first thing is, I'm on live, and even as I'm on live, I'm hearing her story. I'm like, I don't understand why a grown man would be selling drugs with their kid in the car and then tell their kid to hide when the police pull guns on him. So in that, the first thing out of my mouth after that was, if you need resources to help you find a job, whether you are a felon, whether you have a misdemeanor, whatever you have on your record, please let me know so that you never have to be in this situation. If you see the situation right now and you think that you're ever going to be in this situation, please reach out to me. Because this isn't what we want to do. This isn't what we're supposed to be doing.
Right. So
like even as we're reporting, even as I'm highlighting what's going on, giving an option so you don't ever have to be in this situation.
Right. That's understood. Now let me say this. I try to be broad too, because it's important. And Crystal and I talked about this. I want to state this on the record. You might do, and I think Crystal tried to provide balance. Okay. For instance, you might do a story on racial and economic disparity. That's the time I can check into that. That might be kind of heartbreaking, make you think you ain't got no hope. So I try to balance it off. For instance, I went and done a report on black business. Okay. To balance it off, because if you got black people succeeding, and then on one end you got these reports saying, well, you're not getting a fair shake here. But so I find that you have to provide balance. You understand? You don't want to be able to have everything from a one-sided perspective on your reports.
I think it's not a difference. It is a difference. Difference in grassroots reporting and what the Hood News does and what the Shabazz report does is your lives are part of the story. So when Martise does a story and he's saying, "Aren't y'all tired of going to funerals?" We also see him every week on the corner passing out water, feeding the babies, helping people get where they need to go, doing exercise classes for the old folks and the young folks, and then I mean like being of service. And I think
Right,
that's
right.
the PAS report too, that it's like, okay, we're gonna talk about this stuff, but I don't have to tell you I'm a part of my community because my living shows it. And I think that's
Yeah,
what's
yeah.
different than sort of like the swoop in white lens of journalism, like we're gonna write a story about you and then poof, we're out. Like we're just gonna go home to our homes and always be looking in at the story where you're part of the story. And that is actually a really, really important tenet of what has to change in media, in the news. Like we have to find a way to inspire grassroots reporters all over the state because you know I think it's so important. I mean, the service that you provide. I mean, each of you knows what it does for your community, right? And
Mhm.
why it's important. Okay, so I think we're all a little bit of a little bit nerdy, um, and our interest, and our passion for things, and might take for granted that we have a different set of creativity, than maybe other people. And how can we inspire that? And I think the one thing we can all do is just try to find other people doing stuff, connecting, and then just keep on amplifying it because you know.
Crystal,
Mhm.
Crystal, let me say this. I have came in contact uh, with black reporters that work for mainstream media. There's one brother, I think he's African. Yeah, they bring these people in. Like I trained at WBOY for a period of time back in 2005. Okay, and I was there for about maybe 60 days. But I see brothers and sisters from out of state come here all the time and get training and then move on.
Yeah,
Here
there's
at
a black
WBOY.
girl right now. There's a black girl right now at WOWK News Channel 13. Her name's Mariah. I can't think of her last name. Brought her in from somewhere else. She's here. She's on contract for 2 years. She's gonna be right on out of here.
Yeah, see, I experienced a lot of that, right? Now, we remember, Crystal, I remember your father, WSAZ, for years down there. What's the fella? Getting ready, Martin Staunton.
Yep.
Martin Staunton. Okay. Where is he at? Bring him in.
My dad, my dad is so rare. One, he just loves me unconditionally, which is, I could just, but two, he's running a station in Bluefield, Princeton, WVVA, and he is one of very few black news directors in the whole country. My dad literally worked his way up from janitor to cameraman, news editor, to running the station, and so him and Martin Staunton are back together at WVVA. And the other and the other thing about my dad's station is it's so funny because whenever I ask people about, like black news reporters, they always like try to check me and be like, well, WVBA has all these black reporters. I'm like, yeah, no, my dad hires them. Right. And one of the things that my dad said to me the other day, he said it takes a lot of patience to work with the new reporters, the new black reporters. And
right.
He said, this is really important. He said, I'm patient. Even though that I can imagine, it's probably like, people get out of college, they might think they know how to do everything. I mean, he wasn't specific. I was just using my imagination. And he said he wanted to, somebody's calling somebody. And he said he was patient with them because he didn't want them to ever be treated the way he was treated coming up through the news frame. And I thought about that. I thought about the conditions that my dad's probably been through, being in television, being in news, for decades, right? And having to deal with white GM and white reporters and, people that didn't always recognize him as being as talented, and how patient he is in trying to groom this next set. But you're right, Marquise. These people, they come in for 2 years and they bounce, they're out. That's why, that's why I'm very committed to, to creating this Black by God channel where we can have a diversity of people, real people, making videos, make podcasts, making, telling stories. And I don't know how we can, the four of us, find a way to inspire other people. But I think we have to do it in Beckley. We have to do it in the places where Black people live in West Virginia. Because if we're not telling the story, or we don't know who to go to get the hood news, then the data that I have that Leisha did says that Black people zero trust. They don't trust anybody. They don't trust any of the news sources. That means the Gazette. That means whatever, the Herald Dispatch, the Huntington Dispatch. So we participate in these news media platforms. We consume them. We don't really trust them.
But we don't trust them because they don't. What do they report on that benefits us, or that explains us, or that tells a story other than the negative things? Another massive shooting in Huntington. Another shooting on the west side. Long lines at the food pantry due to the pandemic down on the west side.
I don't mean to laugh.
Right.
But you see what I'm saying?
Crystal, I sent you and Reverend Watts a video that I had done some time ago, reports or some video work of Dr. Kynesha Hart from down there.
Yeah.
Did you get a chance to look at?
I did.
I went back and reviewed that stuff again. It always made me feel good because I partly grew up in Western Pennsylvania. In that area, they had Black licensed physicians, and I had never really had one here in West Virginia. And when I went there, I got that, and it does make you feel better to have your own physicians treat you that have your interest. And she seemed so. It was something about her that I could trust her. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's something that, now I got a physician here.
It's like going to your mama. She already knows what's going on. She knows what you go through. She knows how your skin is, how your hair is. It don't lay like the other people's hair lay.
Yeah.
What it is.
I believe we should be in a position to administer that. For instance, having some type of clinic where we can be able to deal with